And we're live, I think. Sweet. So I really wasn't planning on doing this. I didn't tell anybody that I was going to do this, but here we are. By the way, hello everybody. Welcome back to Cricket Lady channel. I did change the name to the Cricket Lady. So, first things first, did not plan on doing this live this week, but I had two really, really good questions that came up that I wanted to talk about for this week's Q&A rather than save it until next week. So I do have two questions. If any of you who are popping on here end up having a question that you want to talk about, totally happy to address that too, meaning for this to be a pretty quick and short Q&A. My hair's all wet. I just got out of the shower, but I have two really good questions that I did want to address. One of them came on last week's Q&A after the fact, and then one came on Reddit. So those two I do want to take care of. Let's see if I can get this light not so violently bright. Slightly better. Very bright in my face. So we are a week into January. I will be uploading. Next upload will be noon on Tuesday, so make sure you come back for that one. We'll be talking all about 2022 goals, which has taken longer than I anticipated it was going to take, but here we are. So let me get this first question pulled up to so I can see what the comment was. Man, where did it go? I wonder. I don't know. Man, sorry. This makes for a really crappy live video when I'm looking for the comment. But I will find it. Let me get rid of that one. There we go. Found it. I don't know why it wasn't showing up in my previous one. So it was on last week's Q&A. So this one coming from the lazy husband. So thank you for the comment. Have you ever had an ant infestation? I'm dealing with one now and want to know of any tips or tricks to get rid of them. So short answer, no, I've never had an ant infestation. Bummer that you're having that. Like, an infestation of anything just absolutely sucks. So eventually I will do a full video on like pests that I have experience with and what we've done to deal with them, how you can keep them out, things like that. I will say, super cool. Thanks, Jose, for responding. It sounds like you have some experience with this. Jose said back, if you have your boxes on racks, or if you have your bins, if you're keeping your crickets on racks, you could put a small bottle filled with water and detergent/soap below each rack leg so ants will drown when they try to climb the legs. He linked an example video to that. So super cool. Thank you, Jose, for giving that feedback. I just did, the reason like I said, I don't have any experience with dealing with ants as a pest, but the reason I wanted to come on here and talk about pests in general is for a broader point, because it has come up in conversations with people, believe it or not, of whether you can use any sort of pesticide to get rid of your unwanted insects. The answer is unequivocally no. Absolutely not. Pesticides are not species specific. They just aren't. So whatever you're trying to eradicate, whatever you are trying to harm, you are going to end up causing harm to your crickets. You may think that you got said pesticide residue and everything cleaned out, that you just had it taken care of. I promise you didn't. I promise you are going to be causing problems in your colony from then on. The only ways to deal with pests are non-chemical. Okay, let me take that back. The only way to deal with pests and not cause problems for the insects that you are actually trying to grow is to do so with, I hate to say the word, like natural, with natural solutions, because if you put apple cider vinegar, which is very natural, in your enclosures, you're going to kill all of your insects as well. So natural is not necessarily non-chemical, maybe is more the words that I'm looking for. So it's things like what Jose said, where you're doing it with some sort of like water trap. Sticky traps work really, really well to take care of all sorts of pests. We use them a lot for spiders. A good old-fashioned vacuum cleaner works really well. The best thing I can recommend is figure out where the ants or whatever pest you're dealing with is coming into your growing environment. If you don't find the source, it's not going, even if you get rid of them, it's not going to be the last time that you have to deal with them. Or if it's ants this time, I don't know, maybe it's spiders next time, maybe it's snakes, maybe it's like anything that can get in through the source. Find that source, figure out what that is, get that plugged up, and that should hopefully keep you somewhat pest free for a little while. Like I said, I will probably do an extended video about the pests we've dealt with and how we've dealt with them at some point. The biggest problems that we've had are when I very first started and got my breeding stock, dermestid beetles, which dermestid beetles are not valuable for you as a cricket farmer. I don't care what you see posted on other forums. I don't care what your supplier tries to tell you that they are a cleaner insect. They are not. They are a pest. They are, you want to get rid of them. If you get crickets in that have dermestid beetles or dermestid beetle larvae in them, get rid of them manually as quickly as possible. I would always recommend, if you are bringing in new bugs, that you are quarantining for a certain period so that you're making sure that you're not bringing any sort of disease or anything like that in there. And then while they're in that quarantine process, make sure you are sorting out if there are spiders in there, if there are dermestid beetles, if there are any insects in that shipment or whatever, maybe you're not getting them shipped. You want to take care of those before you are releasing those new insects into your general population. Don't make the mistakes I've made. I've wound up with dermestid beetle infestations. I have wound up with, there are these spiders called hunter spiders that were freaking terrible for me about 18 months ago. And like I said, I will talk about how we got rid of all of those. It was a lot of work, and pests are one of my bigger fears. Disease risk, obviously, but I think pests are more realistic for the way that we have it set up, because we are not bringing in a lot of outside insects, and like by not bringing in any, like very many, we're not bringing them in at all. So any sort of pest that can come in is our biggest risk, as opposed to disease to a certain extent. But so yeah, I just wanted to address that one, because it's not something, like I said, that I necessarily have a lot of experience with, specifically with ants, but with any sort of pest that you get that is going to be insect based. So like I said, dermestid beetles, spiders, things like that, you are going to need some sort of mechanical solution. It cannot be chemical, unfortunately, because you're just going to end up causing more problems for your colony than you are helping it by trying to eradicate it with some sort of a pesticide or something like that. The second question, let me see if I can dig it up out of my email here. It was actually on Reddit. I probably should get the Reddit app, and it would probably be easier for me to pull it up. But it caught my eye. It's on one of the Reddit boards that I follow, or maybe have posted to at one point. I think it's like Reddit Crickets or something. And when it popped in my email inbox, I was like, oh, I have to respond to this one, because it's one of those things. It comes up a lot, particularly with house crickets. There's probably is justified. There's quite a bit of fear mongering around it, but I just need to clear up some things, some assumptions that go into it. So the question was, why do pet store crickets commonly get cricket paralysis virus, which is Denso virus or CPV? You see that. That's the way it is described in many different ways. When I buy most of them, they become paralyzed and then die. So a lot of things can cause your crickets to become paralyzed and die. It's not just the cricket paralysis virus. I will give this person the benefit of the doubt and say that most pet store crickets are not very healthy. But that doesn't always necessarily mean that they are super diseased. That doesn't necessarily mean that the reason that they are healing over and dying or appear paralyzed, that doesn't necessarily mean that it is the cricket paralysis virus that is causing that reaction or that is causing that death. I would have many, many follow-up questions of, what are you feeding them? What's their environment like? Water, all of those things to hopefully be able to rule out, maybe it's this person really doesn't know what they're doing in keeping the crickets and keeping the crickets alive. They may be assuming that it's the pet store's problem, but it's actually them not being able to properly care for their crickets after they've got them from the pet store. That being said, like I said, a lot of pet store crickets, I hear from a lot of reptile owners and things like that. Whenever I get them from the pet store, they just keep dying. It's not always as cut and dry of it's the pet store's fault, but sometimes it is, and sometimes there are disease problems or disease presence. The truth about pet stores, for the most part, is that most of them have zero interest in actually growing or keeping crickets. The only reason they have crickets is because you have an animal that needs to eat crickets and they can sell them to you. So truthfully, by the time the crickets get from whoever they are getting, like whoever's supplying them, so let's assume that they're shipped in. Shipping crickets is really hard on crickets. So they're already being stressed out. They're already not in an optimal state by the time they get to the pet store. Now let's assume that at the pet store they have food and water. Maybe they don't clean the bins out. Maybe whatever employee it is really doesn't know what they're doing in terms of keeping the crickets. The conditions aren't right. The humidity is too high. All of those things go into whether or not those crickets are necessarily healthy. The other thing, without having a proper lab test, you don't know for sure that it was actually cricket paralysis virus. So let's assume that it is a disease. You have no way of confirming or denying, quite frankly, if it's CPV. I think that throughout the industry, there's a broad brush that gets painted on all diseases for crickets that you just assume it's CPV. Right now, there is a study going on to study the different kind of viruses, different kind of potential problems from cricket farms across the country. Banded crickets and Acadia domesticus. Actually, I think it's North America. So there are studies being done, but just like we can't get just one virus, crickets can get several viruses as well. So there's just a lot of assumptions that go into that of saying, why are my pet store crickets, why are they dying, is more of what that question should have been, not why do they commonly get CPV. You don't necessarily know that that's what they have, and I would have so many different follow-up questions for that. So that was the second of the questions. I responded to this person, and they just responded back with, okay. So either what I said was not riveting enough, or they just don't really believe me, which is fine. Either way, but I just thought it was a great question that I wanted to cover on a live. And then I do see that I have a question in the chat, and hello, thank you for joining. Are you planning on raising anything else? So currently, next 12 months, probably not. Do I think it would be very interesting to do some sort of a line extension and start possibly growing things like mealworms? Yes. I think here in the US, as far as other insects that would be eaten other than crickets, I think mealworms make sense. Mealworms are a tougher start for people psychologically than crickets for whatever reason. Something to do with the worm, the maggot sort of a thing. I think we have an even more guttural response to that. So I think if I was going to bring on a second insect that I was going to raise for human consumption, because that truly is the market that I'm interested in, is the human consumption market and turning them into food. The only other one that I would really have in consideration right now, and from a scalability standpoint, is the mealworm. That's maybe an 18 to 24 month plan. I can tell you in the next like 12 to 18 months, it's just not feasible. It's not realistic. We are still learning at such a rapid pace and optimizing at such a rapid pace on the actual cricket side that the thought and the idea of adding the complexity of learning and bringing on an entirely new insect, ooh, makes me kind of want to puke. So immediately no. But it is, if you would have asked me that question a year ago, I would have told you absolutely not, no way, not ever. But I've kind of changed my tune and my thoughts on it probably in the last 90 days. Just as things have grown, I just think it offers an interesting opportunity because, there's 2,000, a lot of species of edible insects out there. I don't think they all make sense to be raised commercially, number one. And number two, for the US market, all of them don't make sense. Some of them are going to be a much harder sell for the average American than crickets necessarily would be, and crickets are already a hard enough sell. So I think mealworms would possibly be the next if we decide to go that route, and I feel like learning how to raise another insect. So the answer is not yet, but it is a possibility moving forward. So thank you guys for tuning in. Like I said, I just wanted to cover those two questions on a quick Q&A. I did not intend to go live today, but I thought I had those two questions and I thought those were actually pretty important to get covered. If you are tuning into this at a later time, so you're not seeing it live, but you do have a question, please do like the lazy husband did and drop it in the comments and I will address it on the next one. What is today? Today is the 9th, which will make what? Next week will be the 16th. Does that sound about right? I will probably do a live Q&A next week, and I will make sure that I advertise when that's going to happen, hopefully 48 hours ahead of time so that people have some time to plan. But as always, you guys are welcome to drop any questions in the comments, and I will get to them at the next Q&A, whenever that is. I'm planning on doing these one a month going forward at least, but right now, while I don't have as many markets and things like that, I will try and do them every week if I can. So if you watched this far, thank you. Be sure to come back on Tuesday at noon Central Time because that is when the latest upload will drop. And until then, whatever questions you have, drop them in the comments. Thanks for being here. Thanks for watching. I do appreciate it. I know this was a quick one, but like I said, I just wanted to get in and get out and see what happens. So have a great rest of your Sunday and have an awesome week coming up. Thanks, guys.